Hi everyone, welcome to another video. This is part two in a series of two videos that we're making about the entrepreneur category for New Zealand. Entrepreneur category, in other words, means business or self-employment. And as I've said in the first video, which if you haven't seen, you can follow the links and try to find that first video. The entrepreneur category is kind of one of the last places in the Western world that has a reasonably straightforward, easy, when I say Western world, I mean Canada, Australia, New Zealand, reasonably straightforward and easy work visa to residence visa pathway for business entrepreneurs. Now, in that first video, I've explained how to be eligible to get into the country on the work visa. So this video is for those of you who are either already in New Zealand holding the entrepreneur work visa and looking to apply for residency, or it's for those of you planning to apply for the work visa in the future at some stage, and you want to know how does it work to lead towards residence, permanent residence, and perhaps even citizenship in the future. Okay, so what is the entrepreneur resident visa and how does it work? Fundamentally, it's the second piece of the entrepreneur category, work visa being temporary and residence being permanent. So to be eligible for the residence, you have to normally first have an entrepreneur work visa. Now, just as a side note, it's not actually the only way. There are other ways to be eligible to apply for residence. There are some unique circumstances when you can apply for residence, even though you may not have had or held or currently hold the entrepreneur work visa. But I'm not going to talk about that specifically. We're talking about just generally eligibility for resident visa, and normally based on you've already come to New Zealand as the entrepreneur work visa. So the first fundamental eligibility requirement is that you have run your business in New Zealand successfully for a period of time that meets the requirements. 2 years is the standard requirement. In the moment, I'll talk about an exception to that, but 2 years, normally you have to have run your business successfully. Number two, you have to show that your business has followed your business plan, because essentially following your business plan is what we mean by successfully running a business. Now, the business plan that you've used to get into the country on your entrepreneur work visa is where you've outlined all of your business plans and how you're going to go about generating revenue, how many people you will hire, your capital investment, et cetera, et cetera. And obviously, when we apply for residence, we're pointing to that business plan and we're just showing that you've followed all of those things. So in addition to all of that, obviously, there's that you have met the requirement for capital investment, minimum $100,000, that you have employed the number of New Zealanders you said you would employ, that you have generated revenue in line with what you said you would do. Okay, so that's the second fundamental thing you have to be eligible. And the last thing is, of course, the generic requirements for residents, which are health, character, and English language. Okay, these are fundamental for all residence categories. English language is slightly lower than other categories when it comes to the resident visa. However, health and character are a must. You have to satisfy health and character. Just like we talked about in the earlier video, there are waivers available for health and character in the case that you don't actually meet the requirements. However, just keep in mind that if you have a health problem or if you have perhaps some old criminal convictions, you really should talk to a professional very early on to try to find out if it's the type of thing that could be waived in the future. And just to give you an idea of something that could potentially be waived, if we have a situation where you've been convicted of an offence at any time in your life, which the New Zealand courts would otherwise have the power to impose imprisonment on you for 3 months or more, then that's something that would deem you to be not eligible under the character requirements in many cases. For example, drinking and driving. If you're caught at any time in your life drinking and driving and you're convicted of this anywhere in the world, once immigration knows about this, they will say, oh, hang on a second, that's something that if you'd found out in New Zealand to be drinking and driving, you would potentially be in jail for 3 months. So because of that, you don't meet the character requirements. Therefore, you need a character waiver. And a waiver is where we try to balance up all the other factors in your life to see if they will grant you the residency anyway. Similarly with medical, if you have a problem that is a communicable disease or something that's going to be a high cost to the New Zealand system, this is something that they may decline you over unless you're granted a medical waiver. We're not going to talk too much about waivers in this video, but just to know that it's available in certain circumstances, and that's health and character is generally required. Now, let's go on to talk about the application process. Now, we're talking about the residence application process in New Zealand once you've been running your business already. But before I do that, I've just remembered I mentioned I was going to say something about an exception to the 2-year requirement. Let's talk about that first. So earlier I said you need to run your business for 2 years in New Zealand. There is actually a fast track option. So the fast track option is that if you've run your business in New Zealand for at least 6 months and you have invested at least $500,000 and you have employed 3 new positions of New Zealand residents or citizens, you can apply within 6 months for residence without waiting for 2 years. Okay, so just to recap, fast track option, you've invested 500,000 New Zealand dollars, you've employed 3 New Zealanders, you can apply for residence within 6 months of running the business, not 2 years. Okay, let's go back and let's move on to talking about the process. So the process to apply for residence is much like any visa. It's an application. There are forms and obviously documentation that has to come to support your application. The fundamental requirement to be able to apply is to prove that you have satisfied your business plan, that your business is running successfully. What does it mean to be running successfully? Essentially, it means to follow your business plan, because the business plan that immigration has already approved is what they are expecting you to be able to satisfy. So of course, if we can show you told them that you would generate, let's say, $300,000 revenue in the first year, $500,000 revenue in the second year, and that during that time you would employ 2 new New Zealanders, and that your business would be set up in Hamilton in a factory. And of course, if you've done those things, it's very simple. We're going to show all the documents of the payroll, your contracts of employment. We're going to show where the money has been invested. And these are the documents required to support it, because the fundamental point is you're eligible to apply for residence when you've met that requirement of 2 years or 6 months, as I said, and you can satisfy that you've followed your business plan. Now, this is where people get tripped up and where a lot of applications have trouble. And this is the reason why the entrepreneur category has traditionally, at least prior to COVID and the pandemic, has traditionally had a high rate of decline at the residence stage. There are many reasons for this, but one of the reasons for it is that people have put forward a business plan that's very ambitious. And immigration officers have approved the business plan and said, oh, wonderful, if you can satisfy that business plan, we'd be very happy to give you residence. However, it was unrealistic, and therefore when it came time to actually apply for residence, they couldn't follow it. And I'll just give you an example. We saw a few cases like this, and the example goes something like this. Somebody from overseas goes to a local agent. They say, I want to move to New Zealand. The agent says, oh, look, you can try the business category, entrepreneur visa category. Look, it's only $100,000 investment. You know, what do you want to do? And so then they fill in their points requirement. They claim points for the $100,000. They claim points for hiring 3 New Zealanders, new positions, and they say that they're going to open a shop in a town outside Auckland, say selling some retail goods. And so they claim to be in the high growth category because they're going to invest the money into the shop, they're going to take out a lease, they're going to hire New Zealanders, and they're going to generate sales. And they say, we're going to generate $500,000 in sales within the first 2 years. Okay, which, by the way, is not unreasonable for some types of businesses. But then, of course, that person comes into New Zealand, doesn't quite know the New Zealand environment and market. And then once they start trading in the business, they soon discover that actually the product they're selling is not that popular, right? Maybe it's popular in their home country, but not in New Zealand. And so they don't generate the revenue. They generate 100,000 or 200,000. Then when it comes time to apply for residence, they fail and they're declined simply because they overclaimed on their business plan. Okay, so it's crucial that, going back to my earlier video about the work visa stage, it's crucial that your business plan is realistic. Very crucial. Now, other tips that I have for success to avoid that happening to you and to avoid that decline, the main tips for success would be, number 1, use an accountant and a lawyer or whoever you can find in New Zealand. Once you land in New Zealand and you're setting up your business, you need to navigate the payroll system, the payroll taxes. You need to navigate our sales tax system, GST. Payroll is usually monthly filing. GST is usually every 2 months or 6 months in some cases. Then, of course, the end-of-year tax returns. You really do need an accountant or a professional, at least a bookkeeper, to help you with these things, to understand them. And in line with that, of course, maintain good documentation. Really, really keep records of absolutely everything you do. So many people come from countries where documentation is not a big thing, right? Everything's done maybe in cash, sales in, sales out, money in, money out. New Zealand is not like that. New Zealand is a very, very, I suppose you can say, we are a country that is trying to be very professional. Documentation is key. Keep records of everything. These days, not many people are using cash. Obviously, things go through your bank statements. You want to be keeping invoices. You're supposed to keep records for 7 years. Keep strong records of what you do. Second big tip I have is really consider the job creation aspect of this entrepreneur category, because obviously if you're just wanting to work, maybe the skilled migrant category is the one for you. The whole purpose of the entrepreneur category is that you'll generate business that benefits New Zealand, and one of the key things to benefit New Zealand is job creation. If you're going to set up a business that's going to hire locals, New Zealand immigration really likes this, and but in line with that, the job creation aspect also includes a very big caveat and caution, which is you really need to be careful how you deal with and interact with your employees in New Zealand. So one of the things that's underlying all business law in New Zealand is that you comply with employment standards. And it's just not the case that you can treat employees how you have treated them in your home country. New Zealand has very strict standards for how we work with employees. And again, that ties into my first tip, which is to deal with an accountant or a lawyer, someone who can really help you understand how the payroll system works and how New Zealand works in terms of employment law. Because, of course, offering jobs to people is the big benefit for this category. And so you're going to hire New Zealanders, you're going to need to know how to deal with them properly. And I guess really my third biggest tip or advice around anything to do with any visa, but specifically here is to get advice about the immigration aspect. Now, obviously, I've said get advice about running your business. Obviously, I've said get advice about how you employ New Zealanders and locals when you're running your business, but definitely get advice about this immigration aspect, because if you are already in New Zealand holding the entrepreneur visa, do you still have contact with the agents or lawyers back home who helped you get that visa? Have they helped you along the process? Have they helped you to understand, what you're doing while you're in the country? Because if not, you may be out, flying blind without really following what you're supposed to be doing. Additionally, if you're planning on coming to New Zealand and planning on doing this, make sure that you choose someone from the start with your entrepreneur work visa who can stay with you throughout the residence process. So many times we have had people come to us at the stage of residence, and we open up the file and we take a look at everything that's going on, and it's just a big, huge mess, right? And in some cases, it's taken us years to resolve the issue of people who have just not really followed their plan, not understood how to run business in New Zealand. So get professional advice from day one all the way through to the end. It's just too important to not do that. And as usual, good luck with your migration matters. Feel free to get in touch with us. We should have some details in the links below. And ka kite anō.